This is Deper. His opinion is not a word you've ever heard. It's based off the word bipolar, but it's called bipole. Um, it's essentially the idea that different objects in reality have poles, which can be positive or negative, and the manipulation of these poles is what he will be discussing. Um, that's why most of his stuff is polarized into two different and contradictory directions. Um, for this reason, the subject may be a bit darker than some of the other ones, but the point of it is that these can be manipulated to make them both superior or worse in polarity. And we aren't discussing mental polarity because that was more Malou. This is more a physical concept, and it's not something that you would often hear about. For that reason, it's going to be kind of interesting. Um, the difference between Malou and Deper is that Deper focuses more on the outward world, while Malou focuses more on the internal world. But they are similar in the sense that they both carry to polarity in some manner. Malou with the internal side of it, and Deper with the external. Objects in reality have both poles. They have a positive side and a negative side. But it depends, and it's the same for people. Some people are positive, some people are negative. Um, the any physical thing has a good and a bad, in a sense. They have a beneficial side and a negative side, and I've said that 3 times now. But you can alter them. You can make them more positive or more negative, and they're done the same way. I wouldn't recommend doing the negative because it's usually discomforting, but for that reason, we'll focus more on how you can improve a thing rather than worsen it. And for that reason, we'll look at different invented objects and how they can be positivized, or I don't know, ionized might be the right word. And we'll also look at a certain degree of metaphysics relating to it, but I'm going to do it in reverse order because I've never done this before, and we need to study how objects behave before we can study how that functions in reality, because this is more of an objective thing rather than a subjective thing. But it is subjective because it depends, once again, on whether you care if the thing is bothersome or not. Alright, so these are 4 objects that we're going to use during the discussion, or at least the example of how you would go about improving or worsening a object using their poles. So you start by finding the positive and negative of the object. So the positive wand is that it's easy to control, but it's easily tangled. The positive of painting might be that it's beautiful, but it's still. and unmoving. Yeah. A positive of mirror could be that its reflection is useful, but that leads to vanity. And a positive of a book is it stores info, but it, I don't know, books don't take up that much space. It's a storage problem sometimes. Issue. And I'll show you what I mean. Too many books. I like books, but I have too many. That entire shelf is full. That's how you list the different positives and negatives of things that you have. Then you'd go through each one and you would find a way to improve or worsen them depending on whether you want to go to a more positive place or a more negative place. But that's really up to you, I guess. But you could make, for example, you could make the wire sticky, or the string sticky, so that it tangles even more often. Or you could improve the technology of the pom-pom such that it doesn't require a wire and rather just moves on its own like a small drone, and then it won't even tangle at all. For the painting, while you can like make the painting less beautiful and less, if a little more still, by making it like, I don't know, unfinished. You could also not only increase its beauty, but you could do it on the computer or make several paintings and cause the picture to be animated through a screen or other means of animation, such as flipbooks or something like a flipbook but with a picture, which would be a poster that moves much like a film, and it animates as it swaps between the pictures. A reflection leads to vanity. You could increase the vanity by staring at it longer, or you could decrease the vanity by looking at it less often. A book, while the stored info is good, it has a storage issue where you have too many books. What you could do instead of using books is use a computer to store the information. That takes up a lot less space if you like buy ebooks rather than books. But what you could do with that is you could you can't do that, but you could print the cover of the book and put it on pieces of wood, or store, or I don't know, if you really need the book part but not the storage, you can work with the image of the book rather than the like you could store, you could decrease the size with a technology and visually make it look similar, kind of like going from a CD or from a book to a CD, because that takes up less space. That's a really easy way. I'm not going to spend time trying to compact books right now, but the point is that things are positive and things are negative about different things, and through the modification of that, by acknowledging the positive and negative, do you then have the ability to improve on things through something, or deep, or not improve, but like I don't think we have a word for disimprove something, because no one ever does that for some reason, even though it's kind of fun. But that, yeah, you can you can make things better or worse with this, and that's the basic practicality of bipole. But let's look at some metaphysics, such that maybe there's something else we can do with this concept beyond just improving and disimproving objects. Yeah. Another interesting thing about bipole is that it doesn't have to be about good and bad. For example, how can I increase the fey of this umbrella? And by fey I mean fairy. How can I make it more fairy-like? And the answer is probably making it look like a flower. But that's one example of how polarity isn't always about solely positive and negative. It can also be about other concepts beyond positive and negative, such as fairies or other. So it's about increasing not a polarity of that object into something more unique to some other pole. And for that reason, the metaphysics is going to be more complicated than just positive and negative. It's going to be about how poles work instead. So I'll be back. Different poles, and there aren't just two, permit different both style and maybe even usage. Everyone knows how to make something scary if they try. Like, you make this cup in the shape of a skull, and then it's scary. And yeah, but like, people often only think of poles as something that's dichotomous, when it's not actually the case, because I can make things more cup-like too. Like, I could, if I really, really wanted to, I could make everything, including this bird food, more cup-like by making it shaped like cups. Like, I don't know why you do that, but like, you could if you wanted a cup universe where everything was cups. So it's very useful for like the stylism of it. And also all that bird food is great because you can use it as small cups. So it becomes useful. The idea of the metaphysics is that, well, anything can be a pole, and anything can contain poles in the same, like, it sounds weird because it's like anything's a pole, but you can fit poles into anything. And that's the thing, is that there seems to be a universal pole manipulation ability with anything, where the candle pole allows anything to be made of wax, because most things can take any shape. It just might be more difficult to take that shape. And what you can do with this is you can use poles that exist to make certain things related to a subject and design them in such a way that they appear to be relevant rather than solely like it. But like, if you don't use a pole, then it makes it even, like, it creates almost a new pole, if that makes sense. Like the only reason our reality and like cities look the way they do is because we, at least in Western societies, didn't take a specific pole, but rather um, made our own through not selecting a style of specific nature. And we didn't stick to it either. And the surroundings also affect what can be the poles of those objects. Like, if you're not going to use, yeah, and that's the other thing, you cannot use a pole just as much as you can use one, which both limits the way the design of something is and the um, style, and that diversifies the um, style. And you can see on the planet that different people use different poles and different artistic um, things. Like, not all buildings all over the planet are designed the same way because they don't use the same polarity in their manipulation and their art style and their architecture and their eating habit tools. Like, it depends how you use poles to manipulate how something looks. Like, um, this chair is of a different pole than these chairs. They're both black, but like that isn't the same at all. It doesn't have feet. These ones don't quite have feet. They have like a different thing. So the use of poles makes things a lot more original and stylistically different. And so it's a very interesting concept. But other than that, there's not much more I can say on poles right now, other than that you can apply them to both the physics stuff I talked about before. The plore is relevant to the poles, and of course you can match um, ideas, like Malou's ideas, to poles. Like, you're like, how do I make a chair more determined? And it's like, I imagine it would be something like more rigid or more square, more like straight edged rather than free and curvy. So yeah, it's all about the way you interpret different things as related to how you see it. Yeah. This represents several different things, but always dichotomously, kind of, because these and these both represent different dichotomies, but this one is positive and negative, and this one is something else, like color and light. And like, I reversed the sky, so the stars are black and the sky is white, and I picked a random orange color because it looks nice. And thus, the entire pole of the area that Deper is standing in is completely different from the one that we would usually perceive. And so his symbolism is all about the manipulation of poles, and thus the background is a manipulation of the poles. These represent the different kinds of poles, and the city in the background represents the environment through which you interact with those poles. Yeah, this video is not going to be that long, just because it's a very simple concept, but it's a very interesting concept.